Good morning, everybody. Or good evening back in Florida. I'm not really quite sure. And when people text me at 3 a.m., they don't know I'm here. And then when they learn I'm here, they want to know how they could be here as well. And so I would like to thank the custodians of this wonderful country for welcoming us here, the distinguished speakers, the conference hosts who have just been terrific, and of course all of you for being here. I wanted to talk with you a bit today about the problems that we have seen in the United States and the lessons that we can learn from each other. My dear friend Sue Field and I have been attending conferences on and off for probably more years than we would care to think. And one of the things that's always interesting when you get together with people from other countries is the similarity of the problems and perhaps the differences of the solutions. And I do have a chair in elder law at Stetson Law School, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida. We've been working in elder law for a number of years at the law school, and we have been fortunate, my colleague and I, who teach in this field, to be able to educate our students, our future lawyers, about these particular issues. And the takeaway that we always try to impress upon them is that anyone can be a victim of elder abuse, and anyone can be a perpetrator. We have struggled with a number of similar situations as you in the U.S. Some of the solutions that we have used have been a bit different. Some of them have been successful. Some of them need another response. And so when we think about elder abuse in the United States, one of the things we wanted to think about in the beginning is what it is, which I think is true everywhere. If you don't know what it is, you don't know what to do about it. And when we first started working on the topic of elder abuse, it was really being done at the level of the individual states. So we were doing this mainly, I would think, from the bottom up, as opposed to the top down, being a national initiative at the federal level. And so the states that started working on this, and one of those states is my state of Florida, because I don't know, have any of you ever been to Florida? It's a magical place. In Orlando, at least, it's a magical place. But for very many years, we were viewed as a state with a significant population of people who are considered to be elderly. And so we perhaps were facing issues a bit earlier than some of the other states. And so when we first started dealing with these particular issues, we had to think about what it meant. And when thinking about what it meant, we had to come up with laws to address the problems that we were seeing. And so as we started on our fight, if you will, to prevent elder abuse, we found that education became critically important because when we would have law enforcement involved, if we didn't have a good definition of what it meant, they really didn't know what to do. And I have great respect for law enforcement. How many of you in the audience are in law enforcement? I thank you all, because you all run toward danger while the rest of us run away from danger. So thank you so much for the work that you do. But we would see instances of law enforcement saying, well, this is really a family matter. This is really not a criminal matter, and we need you to go and talk to a lawyer about this scenario. But we all know that really it rises to the level of a crime, and we need statutes that bring that to the forefront. And so we have statutes in the United States. Amongst the various states, they're going to be different from state to state, about actions of elder abuse that are crimes. We use elder abuse as an umbrella term, and we look at it as physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual assault, neglect, financial exploitation. When we have this definition of it, That's all well and good, but we need to make sure that these cases get reported. And we have had problems in the US in getting these cases reported. And the problems and the reasons vary. There's a long list of reasons that have been given. And so one of the ways that some of us in the states, some of the states have tried to fight this, was through mandatory reporting. You must report. And if you don't, you've committed a crime. But if you don't prosecute those people for failure to report, it doesn't do us a lot of good. It's sort of like you have a carrot and a stick, but you don't ever hit anybody with the stick. And so we see situations where we know that elder abuse is occurring, but people have been reluctant to report it. They've been reluctant because they're not 100% sure. And I'm sure those of you in law enforcement have dealt with this before when you're interviewing witnesses. Well, I think, but I don't know because I didn't witness it myself. And so I have some friends who have been working in this field a very long time with me. A very long time, or as we like to say, last century, which is very true. I try to explain to my students that, I started practicing law before the internet. It really freaks them out when I tell them that. And I also used a manual typewriter. Yeah, I know it scares the heck out of them. Oh, my goodness. And so, one of the things these friends and I, one's a retired law enforcement who does training for other law enforcement on elder abuse. One is a PhD who does a lot of research. And every time we would give a presentation, we would always say, in the United States, elder abuse is where we were. Elder abuse today is where we were 20 or 30 years ago with domestic violence and child abuse. And it finally dawned on us that we continue to say that, but the length of time isn't changing. And so we began to wonder, are we really making progress in the US on doing this? And we know there are some incredibly successful projects that are being done. But on a national basis, on uniformity, how successful are we being? So we decided that we should do some research because, that's what academics do, and we all find it very exciting. And we wrote an article, and it's got 450 footnotes in the pages, 450 footnotes. So, page 1. Okay, I just wanted to see if you were awake. I'm not going to read it to you. But what we found was we wanted to know whether we're making progress. And we wanted to know from the criminal justice system if we were making progress, because typically in the United States, we have a couple of ways to fight it. One is through adult protective services, where a person who is a victim of elder abuse or even self-neglect, the adult protective worker comes in, does an investigation, can provide services for the individual who needs help. The other is through the criminal justice system, where the law enforcement does an investigation, makes a referral to our prosecuting attorney, who then makes a decision whether to charge, try the case. If they're convicted, they can go to prison. So we decided that it's hard to get data, and those of you who've been working in Australia know the same thing. It's very hard for us to have a really good sense of how bad the problem is. We're pretty sure it's bad. We have some data, and we think it's getting worse in terms of more, but we don't really know that for sure, and we're just speculating. We have some incident reports that we have been looking at over the years to get a scope of the problem, and we know there's a lot. We also know there's a lot that doesn't get reported, and so we decided that we would look at appellate opinions in the U.S., state, not any particular state. We're going to look at all the appellate opinions we could find that dealt with financial exploitation. Because we thought, here's a great idea, because you always think it's a great idea until you write it, and then you go, well, 450 footnotes later, that wasn't such a great idea. But we decided that if we could see an increase in cases, we could make an argument that, yes, things are getting better because we're dealing with it more. And so we learned some things. We did learn that, yes, there are some more cases, but we also learned there are a heck of a lot of variables that really don't lead us to hard data. And so we know that starting in 1990, we found our first appellate case of a prosecution. And guess what? It was out of the state of Florida. We were first, yay. And then we found just a few cases in 10 years. And then the next 10 years, we found more, but not a lot more. And in this third decade, and remember, it's only 2018, we found a lot more, but still not hundreds. And we know that cases maybe never get prosecuted. They may plea out. They may whatever, never even get filed. But we're not seeing as many cases as we thought. However, that doesn't deter us because we're getting ready to start on our next article. Yay. Another 450 footnotes coming right up on financial exploitation using enduring powers of attorney, because we know those happen. We have seen efforts to get a more national presence in this field. And we have seen an ad hoc approach to this where a number of states, a number of organizations that are not federally or governmentally associated have worked hard on this. But it wasn't until somewhat recently that we actually had a federal initiative on elder justice, and it's through our federal Department of Justice. It's called the Elder Justice Initiative. This federal law was pushed for a number of years by the Elder Justice Coalition until we finally got it. It was not passed as a standalone bill. It was actually attached to a major health care bill. And if you follow any goings on in the United States, you'll know that that bill, or that law now, named after a prior president, is constantly under attack. We have this great elder justice initiative, a federal law, and it wasn't funded to the level it was called upon to be funded. We have the effort now to have it at a top-down level, coming from the federal to the state. But we're a little behind because we started at more of a grassroots effort than we maybe should have, but we got there finally. And so now we have a lot of different organizations that are working in the field of elder abuse. And one of the things I always think about is, how does a person know where to go to get help? Because if I simply were to run a Google search in the US on an elder abuse organization, I would get a lot of results. And if I'm just a consumer looking for help, I don't really want to have to weed through all of that. I think a national, this is just my personal opinion, I think a national clearinghouse, one-stop shop would make it so much easier for family members and for victims to get help. I don't know that we'll ever get to that point, but I don't know, I just thought it sounded reasonable to me, and since it was my idea, I'm sticking with it. I think that we also have to remember that the fact of the matter is that with our population aging, there's a very good chance that we're going to see more of these issues. I don't know if any of you know baby boomers. Oh, come on, you all know at least one. And I tell my students there's only two things to remember about baby boomers. We're precious, and there's a lot of us. Oh boy, I don't know about y'all, but in the US, there is a lot of us. And as a result, there's a good chance that as this segment of our population increases, we're going to have this segment of our population who can be victims of elder abuse. In the US, almost 10,000 people a day are turning 65, and this will continue until the year 2030, when the last of the baby boomers reach that magic number of 65. Whether our court system is prepared for it, whether our law enforcement system is prepared for it, I know we don't have adequate funding. It seems so often, many times, things come down to money. But we have to make this a priority. And we have to make it a priority because it is the right thing to do. Because unfortunately, too many of us know someone who has been a victim. We certainly do not want anyone to be a victim. And we also need to respect autonomy and realize that when we're dealing with this problem, we have to strike a fine balance. Because a person may be just an eccentric person. The person may have a different lifestyle. The person may be making unwise decisions. The person may choose to hang out with somebody 50 years younger because it's true love. Whatever the case may be, but we need to have a national conversation about the importance of the issue and how we as a society can deal with it. We have to recognize the role, unfortunately, that family dynamics play in this. And it is one that is uncomfortable. It is one that is hard to resolve. It is one where it's hard to change people's mind. But I think it's really important that we have a strategic framework and we deal with a culture of respect. I applaud you for the report that you wrote, that you have, and the fact that you're looking at a national response to this. We've seen very famous people of late reporting out that they're victims. And Mickey Rooney, who those of you baby boomers may remember, was famous for many things, but one of the last things he was famous for was his testimony before the U.S. Senate Committee on Aging. Mr. Rooney was a victim of several types of elder abuse, and one of his most memorable lines was, "If it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone." I want you to remember as you go forward, not only at this conference, but in your careers, as those of us get closer to that age where we fall into that group who could be victims, that what you do is important and your work matters. And I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to be here. Thank you.